Okay, in this video I want to talk about the hypothetical syllogism, the very basics of it. The hypothetical is the if-then statement. Now it has going to have a major premise and a minor premise. The major premise will house the if-then pattern, if x then y. The minor premise will always affirm or deny one of the terms, one of the conditions or consequences of the if-then, one of the x's or y's. That's the minor premise. Now look, this is the common way of spelling it, but there is also a legitimate second way of spelling it, just so you know. And the clause if x, the if x clause, or part, if you wish, is going to be called the antecedent because it literally walks kedere before ante, and then the then y is going to be the consequent. All right, because it follows sequitur. All right, let's take a look at this syllogism here. Major premise, minor premise, and conclusion. Okay, if x then y, x. Now in that case, you do have a conclusion. It's always going to be y. Now this is called affirming the antecedent. If you affirm the antecedent, you always get the consequent. All right, that is the one of the two rules in this game for hypothetical syllogisms. You affirm the antecedent, you're going to get the consequent, no matter what it is. All right. Now it might not be true, but it will be logical. So in other words, what I mean by that is I can say if elephants sing, then monkeys play the piano. Play piano. And then elephants sing. Therefore, monkeys play piano. You know, this is logical. In other words, the conclusion follows encouragably. It has to follow, and there's no way to improve upon the way it arises out of the major premise and the minor premise. However, are any of these things true? No. And we judge truth by looking at a proposition. Truth is the value of a proposition, okay? And you look at one proposition, which the major premise is, and you say, does it correlate to reality as we know it? No, so it's not true. So the whole thing isn't true. It's not but it is valid because it logically flows and follows. Now, if you have an argument, remember an argument is a major premise and a minor premise leading into a conclusion. If you have an argument that is logical, valid, and also the individual propositions are all true, then that argument is what's called a sound argument. The word sound in logic means both valid and true. Okay, so what about this? Let's move this up. If x, then y. Sorry about the green lines, but it'll work. If x, then y. Not y. Now, this has to follow, therefore not x. And this is called denying the consequent. If you deny the consequent, the act of denying the consequent gives you a denial of the antecedent. So if you work backwards from this thing and you say, okay, if x then y, okay, not y, then you have to say not x. Because I want you to listen to this and I want you to think about it. It says, the promise is, if x, then y. And then if we come along and then say not y, then you have to say not x, because if x, you would get y. But you don't have y, right? Not y. So you can't have x. Because if you had x, you'd have y. But you don't have y. So you can't have x. Do you see that circle? Alright, so you do get a conclusion, always, when you deny the consequent. The conclusion is always going to be the denial of the antecedent. So let's check it out. If I study regularly, I'll make good grades. Now, actually, this is not going to be an example of the denial of the consequent, but this is affirming the antecedent. If I study regularly, I'll make good grades. I study regularly. Therefore, I'll make good grades. All right. Now, is this true? Now, this is a tricky one. Because built into the major premise here is the assumption that if I study regularly, I will make good grades. That has to follow. So this is valid, right? But if I overestimate my ability to retain information and to study well, I may study regularly all I want, and I still won't get good grades. So this has to be uttered from a person who knows that if X, then Y. You know what's just going to happen. Now, what if we do this? If I study regularly, I'll make good grades. And then I go, I will not make good grades. What can we say as a result? Well, I didn't study regularly. Because, you got to take this given its meaning, all right? Don't think of it in terms of being true or false at this point, or actually holding in the natural world of cause and effect. Look at the semantic content of it as being empty. If A, then B. Not B, then not A. So this is a valid conclusion. Okay, but life might surprise you because of the way human beings are. By presenting you with a non-valid conclusion, all right, but let that be a surprise. This is a logical deduction. Now, what I'm saying is this. Let's go up here. Let me erase all this and just say, what if I study regularly, I'll make good grades, and they go, hey, look, I'll make good grades. Okay. Does that mean that I've studied regularly? Well, not necessarily. Maybe I'm just lucky. Maybe I don't have to study at all, and I'll still make good grades. All right. So from this, there's no conclusion. Now, what if I go ahead and up here and say, I won't study regularly? Does that mean I won't make good grades? Well, not necessarily. Maybe I'm just it's very easy for me. So if I have these two, I still don't have a conclusion. Listen, the only way you get conclusions is if you have a major premise with an antecedent and a consequent. The only way you get it is if you affirm the antecedent in your minor premise. Then the conclusion has to be an affirmation of the consequent. Okay? Or if you take your major premise and you deny the consequent, then in your minor premise, then your conclusion has to be like this one. See, I have if A, then B, and here I went not B. Well, then the conclusion has to be not A. That's logic. But I should have picked a situation that's a little more easy to understand, because those with human agency, and humans can be really illogical and end up doing surprising things. How about this one? If I fall into the lake, I will get wet. There's my if A, then B, right? Antecedent, consequent. Now I come along and say, I will get wet. Now what I did here is I affirmed the consequent. That is not a way to get a conclusion, because I mean, how many ways are there to get wet? You can get in the shower, you can get a lawn sprinkler get on you, you can be rained upon, you can have a water balloon fall on your head, you can spill a cup of lunch. So just the very fact that I will get wet doesn't mean that we know I'm going to fall into the lake. Because, falling into the lake might be actually a possible way to get wet. But look at all these other ways. So just to say that you're going to get wet doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to fall into the lake, right? But what if I do this? What if I say this? I will fall into the lake. Then what can be our conclusion? I'm going to get wet. Because any one of these ways gets me wet. And if I do this, I'm going to get wet. So if A, then B. All right? And here I said A. I affirmed A. So I've got to have B. Now what if I said I will, not fall in lake? I will not fall in lake. Oh, excuse me. Does that mean I will not get wet? No, because what if I have a shower? What if I get hit by a lawn sprinkler? So I can't draw a conclusion from that. But what if I denied the consequent? What if I said I will not get wet? Then can I not also say, I can also say, if I say this, I can also say I won't fall into the lake. Now I can say a lot of other things too, like I won't take a shower, I won't get a lawn sprinkler on me, I won't be rained upon, because if I get rained upon I will get wet and I won't get wet. So this right here, this bit of information right here, means none of this is going to happen. And if none of these things is going to happen, then this isn't going to happen. So if I will not get wet, then I will not fall into the lake. I can draw a conclusion from that because I'm denying the consequent. So the conclusion would be the denial of the antecedent. Now, what about these weird ones? What about this? Only if I fall into the lake, then I will get wet. I will get wet. Therefore, you know what? Now I can't say I will fall into the lake, or I fall into the lake. You know why? Because there's an only here. And the only means, hey, you know what? Are there any other ways to get wet? No. There are no other ways to get wet. Because there's an only. So if I do get wet, it has to be that I fell into the lake, because that's the only way. So this is called exclusive, all right? This is the exclusive quantifier, only. And when you have that at play, then you can draw conclusions by affirming the antecedent, by negating the consequent, and by affirming the consequent, okay? So up here, you need to recognize that there is not an only here. This is intrinsically different from this one. All right, it gets a little tricky, but just remember that if one comes to you with a major premise, if A then B, and then affirms A in the minor premise, you have to have B, because the promise was if you have A, you get B. All right? And then if one comes to you with the major premise, if A then B, and then says no B, then you can't have A, because if you had A, you'd get B. So if I fall into the lake, I will get wet. I will not get wet, so I can't fall into the lake. Think about it. It becomes easier with use, all right? But the hypothetical syllogism and statements are all over the place. It's our modus operandi and our thinking schemas and the way we assess things, and it's just how our brain works. So we need to understand this as best we can. It's worth maybe looking through this video again if you don't feel quite sure about it at this point.